and cool my home?
Well, that is going to vary. I'm a fan of going fossil fuel free, but even if you do fossil fuel free, you depending on where your electricity is coming from, you don't necessarily have a fossil fuel free home. So we know that the way the environment's going, if you watch any of the news, follow any of that stuff, we need to get off of fossil fuels, but we are very dependent on them right now. That's a whole other side note. But that being said, depending on where you build, you might not have access to those things. So we decided to go fossil fuel free in our home here, which is built to passive home standards. The one issue is that electricity, hydro, is very expensive where we live. So what we did, we went to passive house because that has all sorts of benefits, but it also really minimizes the heating and cooling demand of a home by about 80 to 90%. So the fact that we're dropping our heating and cooling demand by that much, we were willing to pay extra for the hydro that was required to heat our water and heat and cool our home ultimately. So what we decided to do here was air source heat pumps. And Mitsubishi makes these mini splits, so we didn't want ducts running through the house either, just bulkheads design. That was more of a design thing as well. And then we're looking at different factors. Part of the issue is when you build a high performance home like this, a lot of the manufacturers haven't caught up with what's actually required for heating demand. So we're about 4,000 square feet. In a typical 4,000 square foot home, you would need about 80 to 90,000 BTUs. Ontario building code is what I'm talking about right now. Our home actually only needs about 18,000 BTUs, so it's a fraction of what you would typically need for a home this size.
What's a BTU?
So BTUs is British thermal unit, so that's how they measure how much heat is being delivered from whatever the heat source is. And whenever you're looking at heating furnaces, electric heaters, they'll tell you how many BTUs you need. Now, so I got sidetracked there. Okay, so now what are we doing heat? So we decided to go with the air source heat pumps. Mitsubishi does nice, to call out Mitsubishi on that. They've been doing it for a little while. They do what's called a hyper heat model. So it can heat to minus 25 outside. So the way it works is like a reverse air conditioner. You still have your condenser outside, but then you have wall mount units. So there's other manufacturers that do this as well. That's just what we have in our home. And so we can also set zones. So basically we have these ductless heads that are installed on the walls throughout the home. Not the nicest looking things, but the newer ones are actually a little bit nicer. They have all sorts of other features, but we won't get into that right now. So that's what we decided to do on ours. We could have got natural gas here where we live, but we decided not to. Now, if you are building out in the country where you don't have access to natural gas, and you are somewhere where it's electricity is expensive, and you've already built your house, and what do you do at this point? You're living in a 100-year-old house out in the middle of the country, and you don't have access to natural gas, which is really cheap at this point. So how do you heat? I would say in that case, it probably makes sense to go geothermal if you can do it. So yes, geothermal has expensive upfront cost, but in theory that should actually drop your operating cost. So you'd have to do the calculation. In theory, they say 40 to 60% it will drop your demand or your cost, but that's going to be electricity that's running those pumps all the time, right? So I'd probably go on the lower end just to see, to run your numbers, at the 40% end. But you can run some numbers to see what your payback period is going to be. There are going to be maintenance things, and what if it breaks, and in 10 years, and factor all that stuff in as well. So it's tough to say, but if you can't talk about heating here, then go with geothermal. So cooling wise, a nice thing about the mini splits is that they cool as well, so you can take care of that on the side. If you're in a typical home where you have access to natural gas, where we live, natural gas is still cheap. So natural gas furnaces tend to be the way to go because for a cheaper upfront cost. But as I mentioned it before, if you're watching anything, we're going to be required to get off of fossil fuels. So if you're building a house that you're going to live in, or you want to feel better about when you pass it on to the next homeowner, you're going to be there for a while, I would say do something in terms of that would be fossil fuel free. All sorts of ways. The other way you can do is electric boilers, natural gas boilers. So ultimately, there's not one answer fits all. You're going to need to really figure out what you want to accomplish for your home, for your desired project, and answer a bunch of questions for yourself. How long are you going to stay there? What makes you feel better? How do you sleep better at night? Those sort of things, because that's what we ask ourselves. And then from there, with your heating contractor. If you're building a custom home, work with your builder. They should, if they've done their research, be able to walk you through all the different options that are going to make sense for you. And to put this in line with another question we had asked before about ERVs and HRVs, this is completely separate from an HRV and an ERV. This is how you heat and cool. The HRV and the ERV is how you bring fresh air and keep your indoor air quality good into your home.